Welcome back to Legal Roundup, the podcast where we break down the law and bring you real-world insights with real-world experts. Today, we're diving into something that's at the intersection of real estate and personal injury law. Picture this. You're at an open house checking out a beautiful home, when suddenly you slip on a loose step and fall. Who's responsible? The real estate agent, the homeowner, or someone else entirely? That's what we're here to figure out. Joining us is
Tripp Spruill with Weichert Realtors,
a seasoned real estate agent, and of course, we've got the legal experts from Pepper and Odom Law Firm ready to give us the lowdown on liability, legal risks, and what everyone from buyers to sellers needs to know to stay protected. So whether you're a homeowner, a real estate professional, or just someone curious about how the law works behind the scenes, stick around. This episode is packed with insights you don't want to miss. Welcome to the show, guys.
Good to be here. A moment of silence there.
Yeah, I'm thankful to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah, guys, I appreciate you coming on with us, Tripp.
Yeah, man.
Of course, we have Shaun Chunn and Daryl Porter of Pepper and Odom Law Firm, who hopefully can answer some legal questions for us as we dive into real estate today. As far as real estate hazards are concerned, we want to talk about who's liable when accidents happen on a property. In your experience, Tripp, how common are safety concerns during property tours or open houses? Have you ever encountered something or a situation where someone got injured during a showing?
I haven't personally had anybody get hurt during a showing or an open house, but they are a legitimate concern because you're inviting people into your home to view that property that you have listed for sale. So you want to be mindful as a realtor. You're gonna meet that client beforehand before you ever get into showing, having an open house or even having other realtors show that property. So that's something a realtor should be looking for up front when they get the listing appointment and they're going through talking to the client about, hey, your house will sell better if, we've got it cleaned up or decluttered, when we're talking about those aspects. And then you're looking for that type of stuff. If you've got an older home where it kind of steps down into the living room, or walking up front porch stairs, is there hand railings or anything of that nature. So you kind of want to mitigate that the best you can before you even get to that process where you have people just open house coming in and out of the property or other realtors showing it. But I haven't had, luckily yet, knock on wood, anybody get hurt on a showing or open house. So I hope we don't cross that bridge.
Yeah.
Knock on wood, right?
Yeah, knock on wood.
I think Tripp brings up, he mentioned, my attorney brain is turned on. First of all, definitely happy to have Tripp on with us. He's become a good friend over these last year or so, and we're grateful to have him on to give us his expertise as a realtor. But I think in his explanation, answering your question, he said a buzzword, at least for our attorney's brain, our attorney's mind, is inviting, which makes the person that's coming in an invitee. And so on the legal side of things, the person that's doing the inviting has a duty to disclose or to warn of a hazardous condition, what they believe to be a hazardous condition. And so just buzzwords like inviting and opening their home. And so I think it's he didn't say it, but I heard it, is that when you asked whose fault it is, it ain't his.
Yeah.
It ain't the realtor's fault,
Right.
because he's doing his due diligence by mitigating those things, by looking out for them. Like he mentioned the railing, he mentioned stepping down in an older home. And so I think you got to be a good realtor so you can recognize and notice these things, even when the liability, God forbid, if something was to happen, doesn't rest on him or his realtor's company, real estate company, but it rests on the person doing the inviting, which would be the seller in that instance.
So that wouldn't fall on the homoner,
Well,
per se.
Well, so, and I was going to turn over, since kind of interesting with my career, I'm a realtor and an independent insurance agent. So
That's funny.
I'm kind of swapping over. Yeah, so I'm with the insurance center out on Grants Ferry Road, but I'm kind of swapping over like, there's a reason on a homeowner's insurance policy why you have the liability portion of that, right? And you got medical payments. So my initial conversation with somebody, if they were in that particular event, I would say, hey, this was going to fall on our personal liability under your homeowner's policy. And so hopefully we have enough coverage there. And then on the personal injuries, the medical pay side too, like they could cover any injury on that. But also flipping back over on the real estate side, like the same thing of like recognizing any hazards if you're going into a home is the same thing as that seller, the client, the homeowner, that they have to be forthcoming with anything hazards or what's going on with the house, like that they have to put on the property conditions disclosure. It's the same thing. So we should before we ever get people coming in the house, specifically with somebody who's living in that particular property, we should have a good grasp on what hazards that were there and what was taken care of before we start inviting people in to see that home.
That kind of led me in my next question was, when somebody's listing a property, how would you advise a homeowner per se about, potential safety risks or potential safety risks that could lead to, accounts or any kind of liability from somebody that's coming to view the home?
Yeah.
I know in my experience, whenever I was shopping for a home, I went and looked at a house out in, I can't remember the name of it. It's off of Spillway, closer to Pelahatchie.
Okay.
We got into the home and they didn't tell us anything about how it, on the outside it looked fine. If you go into the backyard, there was like 3 pit bulls like chained up on the fence, and we walked out back and they were just, it was nothing but teeth. And she was like, okay, maybe we'll just turn back around and go inside.
That happens more than you would think. Realtor entering a home and a dog will be in there. And I would say it's about I don't know, if it's 50-50, 60-40 type deal where you're supposed to have that communication with the selling side. So like if I'm bringing a buyer, when I'm looking at a house that a buyer may be interested in, I'm looking in the agent notes of the MLS, the multiple listing service. And so that's stuff that we can see that the consumers can't see. I'm looking for certain notes. Hey, leave the lights on when you leave, lock certain doors. Oh, FYI, there's pit bulls in the backyard, but they're chained up. Or FYI, there's pit bulls in the backyard, they're not chained up, may not want to go in the backyard. Right. So you're supposed to have certain agents and communication. That's where, as realtors, we're supposed to be really open with everybody on the realtors coming to show the house, and really making sure the information's out there so we know what we're getting into, particularly in that. But there have been times we go into a house in the backyard and the dog's loose and we didn't know it was back there.
Have you ever heard of anybody like getting bit or like that they like had a case or anything like that? I know
I'm sure it's happened. I haven't had any of my co-realtor friends or anybody with other brokerages that I've heard just a horror story that they walked in and got mauled by a dog. So,
good Lord,
they do.
The barking, normally when you pull up and you got something like that, I mean, you get telltales pretty quick. You know what I mean? And now we have had people like I have personally showed up at a house and not known there's a dog there, heard barking, text the listing agent, be like, hey, is there a dog or is that somewhere else? And I'm like, oh yeah, but they're fine. They're just, they're German Shepherds, but they're pet bags. And you're like, okay.
Yeah. Are you sure?
Yeah.
Right.
I know we've dealt with dog bite cases before, haven't we?
Oh yeah.
That's what I thought. So I mean, what would y'all's take be on that? If, let's say for instance, even though they're not supposed to, they're supposed to have it listed. Let's say that somebody goes in there and they don't hear a dog and they can't give them a heads up and they get to a back room and that dog isn't chained up and it's very territorial over the house and they, the realtor gets bit, maybe the buyer gets bit. How would we take that on from a case standpoint? Who would be liable necessarily?
For sure the homeowner situation. I think there's also depending on the set of circumstances, I could see a realtor being involved. You know, say a realtor was aware of this dangerous animal, and they're the ones that let him out. They let him go on the loose. Now you could potentially have a realtor's negligence involved in the case as well.
I assume in
Yeah.
that case they would particularly most likely lose their license.
If not, they would. They're well, you know, anything can be reported to Mississippi Real Estate Commission and things like that, and I think there would definitely be some type of slap on the wrist. I don't know if it would be something to lose, unless they did it like in the intent of harm. You know, I don't like this realtor's coming. We're gonna turn this dog loose. You know, they're always beating me out of this or that and the other. But like, I don't know if they can't prove like a legit gross negligence. I guess would be. I don't know if they would lose a license per se, but they might have. They could. I don't. I'd have to look into that. I'm speculating, but I could see the MREC might say, "Hey, you know, you may get a fine or slap on the wrist or something of that nature." But what people would sue happy if somebody came to me, one of my insurance customer, homeowners, like, "Hey, I'm getting sued for this instance," and then you know their lawyers get involved. They may say, "Well, the realtor should have made sure." That I could see how it could kind of spread a little bit from that. You know.
Yeah, I think, and I know, not to get too far off, but you know, a lot of times on our show we talk about insurance adjusters, and we don't
We do.
exactly shed a negative light on insurance adjusters. I just want everybody to be very clear about this. Tripp is not an insurance adjuster.
No. I'm an
He's an
agent.
insurance agent.
I'm an insurance agent.
So,
an independent
yeah,
insurance
an
agent.
independent insurance agent,
Yeah.
which is completely different than an adjuster.
yeah.
And maybe we have to do a podcast on, you know, the difference
Yeah.
between them. So I won't go into detail other than you need to know is when we're talking trash about the adjuster, we're not talking about the agent
Yeah.
like Tripp. We're talking about
Well, I
somebody.
appreciate, yeah,
We're talking about
the
somebody
clarity.
completely different.
Hold up.
Yeah. We just want to be clear about that.
But I do obviously talk hand in hand. I do work with the adjusters when I'm
That's
putting in
right.
claims and stuff of
That's
that
right.
nature. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm not that.
Yeah.
That is, you know, that is something people do get confused about a lot. Is
Yeah.
like they're like, oh, well, they're talking to why would you have them on the show, or why would you associate with the agent? Well, the agent, it's not the agent's fault. It's the adjuster's
Yeah,
fault.
but a
So-
lot of people think that it is a lot of our fault.
Yeah, because they want to get to the person they can
Yeah.
touch and they can reach, and so you know their neighborhood insurance agent, and something goes wrong, well they're going to go cuss him out first.
That's right.
That's
They don't-
okay though.
Yeah, they don't even know the other person really exists.
I'm a good person. I'm a good person to let people vent and bend the ear. That's what I'm there for. You know what I mean? I mediate those circumstances.
go.
So there you go.
That's
Yeah.
good. Sorry, I just thought I really need to put that out there.
That's smart. You're right though, because people they get it confused all the time. Whether you know, because that's like you said, that's the initial reaction is like, oh, I gotta call my agent.
Yeah.
You know, this is ridiculous, and then they'll call their agent, they're cussing them out, and then it's an issue. So
There's so much more going on behind the scenes on the corporate level in the insurance world than most people even ever realize. And I worked for 16 years as a life insurance underwriter, and I learned a lot about the behind the scenes and risk pools and reinsurers and all this kind of stuff and why rates go up. And so the knee-jerk reaction is when rates go up, you know, they feel like I hadn't done anything wrong. But the risk pools is where you could go into the weeds on all that. But anyway, but the same in real estate. There's a lot of moving parts that people don't see. And people see like house, sell, close. They don't see all the behind the scenes, you know, wheels that are turning and stuff like that. So.
Not to get sidetracked, but I want to talk a little bit about premises liability for a second. And this question is for you, Tripp.
Okay.
With there being so many older homes on the market, especially Mississippi, what are the most common hazards that you see that could pose a risk to a visitor, you know, despite maybe a dog or something like that?
I mean, it could be, you know, stairs without hand railings. It could be holes in the yard. You know, it could be Tripp and hazard. I mean, home inspectors are really good at circling everything that could be a tripping hazard, whether there's a crack in the concrete or a loose tile on the floor. I mean, you get into premise liability, that is a wide range of things that you could. That umbrella holds a lot of things. It could be broken glass. I mean, it's, you name it, it can be under there. Something, a loose, something falls off the ceiling. And we do go into a lot of homes. I went in one the other day that was a fire. Man, everybody was calling on this house. We want to go see it, we want to go see it. And I went to go see it before I wanted to show anybody, but it was on the market and it was gone just like that, because it was such a low cost home, but it had all the fire damage was there. And I walked in there, I was like, this is a condemned building, So you want to talk about premise liability, anything in that, if you show somebody that, sky's the limit.
It's just wide open.
It could be wide open on what they have. I mean, but you're also to cover their end, the homeowner, and they did it the right way. You had to sign a document stating that you were going into a building that was hazardous.
Yeah.
And so it was basically their way of what do they call them?
Covering themselves.
It's kind of like a waiver, like before you go and go to like a certain.
It was like it was a hold harmless agreement, is what it was. And so it's like, so you read this thing and you're like, you're looking at the front of this house, and you're like, oh, it doesn't look too bad. The garage door was jacked up a little bit, from firefighters doing their thing, but man, once you stepped in, you're like, oh, this is why they have us do the hold harmless. So that probably protected them in case something were to happen.
Yeah.
You got these old houses. I mean, you could step through an old subfloor, stuff like that. I mean, anything that is going on with that structure that is not up to code and could hurt somebody, it could fall under that premise liability.
Well, I guess legally speaking, if somebody were to go through and they didn't sign any kind of waiver, or if let's just say generally speaking, if somebody were to slip and fall during an open house, or something like that, would the real estate agent, the property owner, or both be responsible?
I would say you definitely got the property owner, for sure. And then the real estate agent, I think there's some questions that come with it, if depending on their agency and their relationship, if they're also acting as a property manager in the interim, or say, and tell me if I'm way off because I don't know how fully real estate works, but say if you're selling a house, they haven't been in it for months, and they just put you in charge of repairs and say, just bill us, we'll pay you, you hire to get it done and all that. If you're creating some sort of agency relationship and the dangerous conditions come while you're acting as a property manager and you're not fixing them, now I could see you opening yourself to some sort of liability.
Yeah, I mean, there's some of these, so you're talking about like rental properties or such like that, they're property managing, so and there's a lot of brokerages that have a rental side of their business, and I mean, it's they're under contract and fiduciary duties to the owners of those homes to let them know, hey, above a certain amount, we're going to contact you to say we got a problem, we got to get it fixed. There is I know that there was a company, I'm not going to throw the name out there, it's nothing bad or anything, this is just the way that they did things, but like up to like $300 or $500, like you just had to have the money in the bank and they would go fix it. Of course you get a report of that, but anything above that nominal number, they would want the owner involved to say, how do we tackle a bigger problem? So if your property manager's falling down on that, then sure, the homeowner could be like, well, hold up, I didn't get my information. And so, I guess that's when you guys would come in and be like, well, who's actually the procuring cause of this fault? You know what I mean? And I think that's where it would probably go from there.
As far as legally speaking, what steps could a real estate agent or a property owner or a property owner could take to protect themselves legally in case of an accident?
Well, the homeowner's got insurance, hopefully, and so that's always you always got that liability section there that can protect you. I mean, that's all insurance is. That's a CYA. Hopefully, somebody won't sue you if something were to happen, right? As far as a realtor goes, like real estate, so it's my job to go into somebody's home if they're looking to sell it and tell them what they can do you know, where the market sit, what their neighborhood's looking at as far as price, and then what they can do to try to maximize, you know, what they can get off the sale of their home, but also not just to make it look good and presentable, but also like if there's hazards, like, hey, you know, if we got a handrail that's coming off the wall, like, I'm going to tell you, you're going to have to get that fixed. Particularly before somebody starts coming to see the house, because you avoid that problem right there. But then on top of that, if you don't fix it, the home inspector's going to come in there and ding everything anyway.
Right.
I mean, so then you're going to be beholden to, you know, at some point in the deal, you're going to have to fix some things that, you know, either aren't up to code or could be a hazard. So, you know, as a realtor, we try to, you know, I'm going to try to go in there and locate some of that stuff before it happens, surely to help somebody not, you know, get, you know, hopefully a lawsuit against them, but also to make sure the house is presentable, somebody would want to buy it. You know, somebody comes in there and the handrail's falling off and something else looks bad, they're may say, hey, we'll just go to the next one, you know. So it helps also sell the home to get those things fixed too.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, I've been into some, like I said, whenever we were looking at that house that we went to view, which funny enough, it was the same house. When we walked in, I mean, she said, look, it's pretty rough. When we walked in, I mean, the foundation, there was
yeah.
a crack
Yeah.
this wide
Oh, wow.
going through the entire house from the garage all the way to the back of the master bedroom.
Yeah.
And it just
and again, that premise, I mean, that can be a hazard. You know what I mean? You can trip
about
on
broke
that.
my ankle.
Yeah. So there
walking
you go.
through it because you couldn't see it under the carpet.
Yeah.
And she didn't say anything. She was like, it seems to be fine. I was just looking around. I was like, there is crayon marks from the floor to the ceiling. And I mean, I understand kids, but how did they manage that? It was pretty surprising because the outside looked pretty good. I was like, okay.
Well, foundation, I mean, we are in Mississippi. It is not an uncommon thing to run into foundation issues in many houses. And it's funny, you'll go to a neighborhood that has older homes and they're structurally solid. And then you'll go to a new construction build and within 2 or 3 years you're seeing, you know, it's just playing Russian roulette with the soul sometimes. And I guess, you know, when it happens, it's not if it happens, it's when it happens. Yeah.
I think that goes for everything in Mississippi with all the clay, the Mississippi clay and stuff. And then I think in that area, the biggest thing that she told us as far as foundational issues go was that, you know, whenever they were building the reservoir and they were digging that out, they were just dumping all that dirt and that mud right in that area. And they didn't treat the dirt when they built on top of it.
That makes sense. Could be, yeah.
So at least that's the theory of why they're so bad in that area specifically. But I mean, there's a lot of great houses over there too, though.
Oh, absolutely, for sure.
There's a lot of really big, very expensive houses. But back to the legal side of things, I know we've had a case I think it was last year, where someone was on a balcony and it fell through. Are there any cases like that where that were involving real estate that kind of went in a surprising direction or kind of had some really strange, implications? I mean, and what kind of factors usually tip the scale in y'all's favor whenever you have something like that?
Yeah, so we're still working on that case.
Really?
And that one was unique in the sense it's rental property, being Airbnb property. And so what we look for from the legal, from our legal eyes, did the property owner, whoever invited the invitees, did they know or should they have known that there was a dangerous hazard on that piece of property? And so, again, if I know that there's a gaping crack or hole in the floor, and I fail to disclose that as the property owner, a homeowner, and I fail to disclose that to the realtor, the selling agent, or the people that are coming that I've invited into my home, then I would be surely found liable. And then now we just reduced our case from a liability case to one of damages, how hurt the person is. And so I know Shaun has been working a couple premise liability cases. I have as well. Pepper doesn't really like premise liability cases. for good reason. The state legislature passed a bill. Um, the I forgot what it's called, what the name of the bill was, but they passed it back in 2019. It basically makes it a little harder to sue businesses. Yeah, well, businesses when it comes to a premise liability case. But again, Shaun and I take premise liability cases. I find them to be fun, and we've done a really good job with the ones that we have taken as well, and been able to get our clients good settlements as a result of those cases. And so, again, things we look for, does the property owner know, or should they have known that their property has a dangerous dangerous hazard on their property that would cause somebody bodily injury.
So let me ask you this then, as far as like a hypothetical. And maybe one of you know better than maybe one or the other, I'm not sure. But I know there's a concept of duty of care that's a, pretty known legal concept. So let's say, for instance, an agent notices a hazard in a home and they don't warn the visitor for whatever reason. Could they be held partially liable for the injury? And how would that play out in a court setting?
I know for the real estate part of this, like as a realtor, one of our code of ethics is just honesty. I mean, if we know there's a latent defect, if we know there's some type of material defect or whatever, regardless of if the seller, if I'm representing the seller, has disclosed it or whatnot, because legally we cannot, as the realtor, we cannot fill out the property conditions disclosure. That's homework for our clients. Okay, when we're doing that, we're like, hey, you got to fill this. This is basically your outline to tell buyers, what you know or may not know about your property that you've lived in for X, Y, Z. But if we know, we can visibly see it, and they didn't mark it, and that's obviously a conversation hopefully the realtor has with their listing clients too. Like, hey, it's beneficial to list all this stuff because you don't want anything to back a deal out or get anybody in trouble. But if there's something there as a realtor, and I've got another buyer coming in, it's my part of my code of ethics, honestly, be like, look, you're going to see it. It's there. And that helps, again, try to, put that hazard out there so that they're not shocked by it or get hurt by it or whatnot. And also just, for you to do the right thing for, I mean, like I said, ethically, I have my fiduciary duties as a seller, but I also have to be honest to my customers who I don't have a contractual relationship with. So, and that's the other realtor too. So, we have to have that open and honest communication and feedback with one another. I mean, that's just a part of our code.
And I think when dealing with an honest realtor, which I'll say all of the realtors are honest because they all follow the rules of ethics.
That's right. That's right.
And
Everyone
so just like
me.
That's right. Just like every lawyer follows every ethical rule that they're supposed to as well. And so with that being said, that absolves him of any liability because he should have known, and he also disclosed that that hazard or that problem to the person that's coming in. And so then at that point, as a lawyer, we're looking at, did they disclose this hazard that was there? And also you have to make sure that it's not an open and obvious hazard. And so again, you got a gaping hole this wide through the property from the living room to the bedroom, and it's covered up by carpet, and somebody steps the wrong way and breaks their ankle. Well, then that's a problem. Because they literally tried to conceal it. But if you got the realtor that's in there trying to sell this house and say, hey, look, be careful here because there's a hole actually under this carpet. He's not concealing it. And so, but the fact that the homeowner is trying to conceal it, and if you still get hurt, you may have some type of legal ramifications against the homeowner. It might be a stretch because the realtor told you about it, and so now it's kind of like, well, you did know that dangerous condition existed, and so it may be a more or less, rather than it could be more or less maybe some type of breach of contract or something of that nature, if there's something that you've signed with through the realtor as it relates to the homeowners disclosing uh, certain things. And so, now that I think about it, and you stop me if I'm about to go down a rabbit hole. On top of while being a realtor, he also has to. You have to have some knowledge about contracts as well, because you deal with that. Actually maybe what would you say? Maybe 50 to 60% of your job.
That's a lot of paperwork.
Yeah, dealing with contracts.
Yeah, I mean, you got well, when we have, we're obligated to get just a one sheet piece of paper working with a realtor, working with a broker form signed when we have any substantial communication about real estate. You ask me a question, that's different. But if you ask me a question, then we sit down and we start going over stuff. We have to get those things signed. If MREC comes and says, "Hey, let me see you're working with a real estate broker," and I can't provide any, they're like, "Well, you telling me you haven't talked to anybody about real estate, and that's what you're doing?" So that's just one upfront, quick and easy one page, and it says on there. A lot of people, there's some people like, "Well, I'm not looking to buy." I'm like, it says it's not a contract. It's not a legal binding contract. It's just saying that I talked about what type of agencies we provide and that we talked about real estate in more depth. So yeah, I mean, we've got that, and then it gets into whether you're on the buying and selling, and then you got buyer agency agreements and exclusive listing agreements, and am I signing somebody as a listing client, a buying client? Do they understand dual agency? That's a whole other thing. Are they just a customer? Because you can still help somebody out. They don't want to be represented, but you can still help them out in a deal as a customer. And then you go into, that's just before we even get to offers and counter offers and stuff, So yeah, there's a lot of paperwork.
Yeah.
And it'd be, if you don't know, and I've gone back. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that gets changed. We've had a lot of changes with the National Association of Realtors lawsuit that has just happened, and you got to go back and read it, and that's why we have continuing ed stuff too. So yeah, we have to be very versed in our contracts.
Yeah.
Or should be.
Sounds like he also has to know a little bit about negotiations as well.
Oh yeah, and I know that's. I feel like between real estate, insurance, and law, that like literally paperwork and negotiations are probably like two of y'all's biggest things.
The name of the game.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I like the negotiating part more than the paperwork.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, I think we do too, huh?
Yeah.
So where does that differ when it comes to rental property, though? Is that if a tenant's guest gets injured because of a maintenance issue or something, how would liability be determined? Landlord versus tenant.
Owner. So all right, so it's going back to the insurance policy. So that owner of that property is going to have a landlord policy, and so I have 6 rental properties of my own, and so I self-manage them. And I have a landlord policy on each one of those. Now, my tenants sign a document that says that they understand that I'm insuring the structure, the house itself. I don't insure any of their contents. And it's up to them to get renter's insurance. So if the house burns down or a tornado comes or whatever it may be, they know that I'm covering to rebuild, repair my ownership of the building, my building, my asset, but I'm not replacing their couches and their clothes and, their, coffee makers or whatnot. So that premise liability is the same thing as a HO3 homeowner's policy, right? It is as a landlord, I have certain liability limits that I can, or any investor or property manager can choose for their insurance. So if, tenant gets hurt, it's going to fall back onto, ultimately, not getting crazy with any like stories or hypotheticals, but like something happens, then the first place they're going to go to is going to be the landlord's insurance policy for the liability limits.
And something, I guess, with if you were to get into a like kind of a complicated situation and we had to, represent, let's say, a tenant. I've always heard that tenants, especially in Mississippi, they have more rights than a landlord. Is that fact or is that fiction?
I'd like to say that it's pretty fair between the two. And of course, I realize depending on which side you're on, you may, one may disagree. I've been on both sides of that. I own some rental property as well. And so from a landlord's perspective, sometimes I feel like my hands are tied by the law. And then I've been on the renters, been a tenant as well, and I've oftentimes felt like my hands were tied with the law then, and so I think it depends on what's going on and what's happening, in an instance where a tenant is not paying their rent just because they don't want to pay the rent. Well, we got as a landlord, you need to get out. And then also as a landlord, I realize that I have to go through court and so on, have them evicted. And
that's a process.
On top of waiting period
Yeah.
between notices and everything.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
that.
That's
There's
exactly
a warrant
right.
served,
Yeah.
everything.
That's exactly right. And so as a landlord, I feel like the law is not on my side because now this
Yeah.
person is literally living rent free for however long it takes for the court to say, get out. And then on the flip side, as a tenant, if I have my air conditioner's not working here in Mississippi in July when it's 150 degrees and I don't have my faucet's not working properly and I've asked the landlord multiple times to have it fixed, and he or she is taking his sweet time doing it. And that's a whole process in itself to get done. And I feel like maybe the law is not on my side then, because I may not want to. I'm not paying my rent, and that's called constructive eviction. But then I don't have anywhere else to go either. And so I think it's from 30,000 feet in the air, looking at both sides and being on both sides. I think it's pretty fair. But again, in that moment, depending on which side you're on, it can definitely seem unfair for an individual.
I think there's other. I don't know him. I mean, I can't speak on this in like 100% fact, but I think I know where you're coming from. Like, there are definitely some other states that are more tenant-driven laws than for landlord or whatnot.
Oh yeah.
I don't know, to be honest. I mean, I know of what I feel like I need to know to run my business, but I don't know if I know of a discrepancy or a lean in one way or the other. Like you said, I feel like for both my experience in my 7-8 years I've had rentals, that we've had a few little bumps along the road, but I hadn't had anything that was just like, oh, this was out to get me or whatever. So I think it's probably weighted about the same.
Yeah. I would agree.
Documentation, folks.
Yeah. And make sure everything's in writing.
I mean, that's the same thing with anything like, whether I'm doing a real estate deal, insurance, or signing a tenant. Like, I have found that every bit of communication, everything that gets signed, everything that, like, hey, such and such broke, all that stuff, text messages. Because at the end of the day, if something does happen, I found that thicker file tends to weigh a little bit heavier if you've got all your, so.
Absolutely.
And just be fair landlord, man.
Yeah. That's the easiest thing.
Just be nice to people.
Be
and
nice.
Treat them right.
Don't be.
They're in your property. Treat them right.
That's right.
But that's got to be reciprocal too.
Exactly. Be a good tenant.
Yeah. Be a good
Pay your
tenant.
rent on time.
Yeah.
If something's broken, let the landlord know.
Let them know.
And like I said, on the other side, be a good landlord. If it's your responsibility to fix it, just go ahead and fix it.
Yeah.
Don't ignore them, but still expect the rent to be there on on time and in full.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, if you're not paying your rent, I wouldn't expect them to get into a hurry to come fix your stuff.
Well, yeah.
Then again, I mean, I pay my rent on time, and I've been in situations where they did not come. But then again, I've also been in places where I was like, hey, I just moved in. Weather got real bad. The fence is down. I know it doesn't really matter that much because it's just one side of a fence, but do you want to come fix it? They're like, yeah, we'll be there tomorrow. I was like,
normally if they
heck yeah.
care about the property, they're gonna come fix
They're
you
gonna come
up.
fix it, yeah.
I
Oh,
mean,
man.
it is something that they're using as a wealth tool, so
That's right.
or part of their financial plan. So
That's right.
Oh, dude,
yeah.
they turned around in one day,
that's
Yeah.
awesome.
and they
take pride in
Yeah.
their property.
So I guess I'm gonna run you through another fact or fiction before we close up. If somebody gets injured in an open house, the real estate agent can't be held liable.
You're gonna hate this answer, but it's every lawyer's answer. It depends.
Yeah.
There is no just fact or fiction with something like that. There is almost always in any situation there could be a fact pattern that ends up putting liability on the realtor in situations.
So even if you sign a waiver to go into a, like, let's say for instance, a burned house, because it's a good deal, you couldn't sue for injuries if there was so happened to be a loophole and you got hurt while you were there.
If they consider the contract unconscionable, there's a chance. Like I said, there's always an it depends.
Yeah, I don't know if I would ever say like
100%.
yeah, 100%. Like, you know, crafty people can find ways. I think, I mean, that's why realtors carry E&O insurance too.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
If we have something that comes around, I mean, in any type of professional, whether you're a lawyer or insurance, I mean, I'm an insurance agent. I sell E&O, and I still have E&O as an insurance agent. You know, and so I think there could be. I'm not gonna sit here and say nope. It's a homeowner. It's this, but because like you said, it probably is that depends.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's always a gray area, and so the gray areas are what keep us employed. And I guess you know, I wear two hats. I serve in the legislature as well, where we make these laws that have these gray areas. You know, a lot of times it does get frustrating at the Capitol. It's like, why don't we just make it say this? And then you have a lawyer like, well, if it just said that black and white, you probably wouldn't have a job, would you? I'm like, well, I don't practice that type of law, so. Like, that doesn't practice. I don't practice that type of law, so it wouldn't affect me. But yeah, I agree with both Tripp and Shaun. And that type of hypothetical, it just depends on the facts.
Well, guys, I think that's almost all the time we have today for this episode. On a closing note, Daryl and Shaun, is there anything that you could recommend to, let's say, you know, anybody on either side, as far as maybe a buyer or a real estate agent? Is there anything on the legal side of premises liability that you could recommend to someone that would help them steer clear of that liability, other than, of course, buying insurance to protect themselves, which is the obvious?
I disclose anything. It's never worth it to try and hide it, maybe thinking they won't find out till later or something. If there's a dangerous condition on the property, it needs to be disclosed. And if you're injured due to a dangerous condition on the property, give us a call after.
That's right. That's right. No shameless plugs. There's no shameless plugs at all.
No shameless plugs. I couldn't have said it better. I'd only add call 601-202-1111. And I'll say this as well. Tripp is really good at his job. He's good at what he does.
I appreciate
He didn't ask me to plug him at all, but if you are looking to buy or sell, you guys should give Tripp Spruill a call with Weichert Realty. So that's Shaun. Yeah, Shaun covered that other part. Just add the phone number. If you're looking to buy or sell, give Tripp a call.
Call me.
Or apparently, if you need insurance as well.
Look, I deem myself the double agent. You know, while you're in insurance, while you're in a real estate deal, you know, I try to take out another middleman by being the insurance. So yeah, Weichert Realty, Weichert Realtors Innovations over in 042 Brandon and Gluckstadt, and then the Insurance Center over at on Grants Ferry Road in the Reservoir.
Boom.
Well, Tripp, is there anything you can suggest for any other realtors in your field, or anybody that's looking to buy before they go out, so that they can protect themselves from issues like this as well?
I think just, you know, like you said, full disclosure. I mean, it's almost like we tell our kids at home, like, tell the truth up front. You get in less trouble on the back end. So just make sure that obviously you're aware of your property, and if you're a buying agent, if you're representing the buying side as a realtor, just make sure that you know as much about that information, much information on that home you possibly are showing that you can, so you can, give your buyer the best, information they need and know what they're walking into. As a selling client, just make sure your house, take care of your property. And if you've got something that could be a hazard, get it fixed. At the end of the day, you probably have to get it fixed before the deal closes anyway. So
That's right.
Just avoid all that so we don't have to get in these circumstances.
That's right. That's right.
That's right.
All right, Tripp. If you want to plug where the audience can find you at, you said you're at 2 different places for insurance and real estate. So where can we find you?
So I can be found on Facebook. I have a Facebook real estate page. It's just Tripp Spruill Weichert Realtors, and then same thing, Tripp Spruill Insurance Center Flowood Brandon. I'm also on Instagram, tspruill4. And then we are actually, me and my buddy and partner in real estate, Ryan Watson, are putting out we're actually starting a podcast for real estate. And it's going to be the Mississippi Real Estate Podcast, hosted by Ryan Watson and Tripp Spruill. So more to come on that, but Facebook and Instagram, for sure.
Yeah. Now you got your hat on. I don't know if everybody will be able to see it. You might want to spell Weichert.
Weichert?
Yeah.
Weichert. And I guess I'll go ahead and throw my phone number out there too. The cell phone gets me on both ways, 601-941-8038 if you need to contact me. And I have a Tripp@insurems.com for insurance, and then T Spruill, Spruill @WeichertInnovationsWR.com.
There you go.
Man, you ought to be able to find me after all that.
I was about to say, yeah.
They ought to be able to find you one way or another,
Just
Tripp.
gave you his whole FBI, CIA profile.
Yeah, that's it. But I enjoy it. Thank y'all for having me on.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming on and being a part of the show, Tripp. That's a wrap for today's episode of Legal Roundup, and thanks for the advice from our awesome attorneys here at Pepper and Odom. Thank you guys for being on the show and walking us through some surprising legal twists in the world of real estate. Whether you're buying, selling, or just visiting properties, today's discussion proves that knowing your legal rights can make all the difference. If you've learned something new, or if you're thinking twice about your next open house, be sure to subscribe to Legal Roundup on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And hey, if you got a legal question or an idea for a future episode, reach out to us on social media or drop us a line at pepperandodom.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.